Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Friday, March 17th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. Of the 32 games in the first round of the NCAA Tournament, Kansas State's contest with Montana State is the 30th, tipping off Friday evening around 8:45 p.m. Central. That gave us enough time to break down the Wildcats on today's SportsBeat KC podcast with beat writer Kellis Robinett. K-State's one of the most unlikely tournament teams based on preseason projections. They were picked to finish last in the Big 12. But in Jerome Tang's first season, K-State came in third in the league and is a number 3 seed, taking on Montana State in the NCAA opener in Greensboro, North Carolina. We discuss how it came together, including the role of the team's 2 returning players, Markquis Nowell and Ismeal Massoud, in shaping this year's roster. Also, we look ahead at a possible Kansas State-Kentucky second-round game if those teams win on Friday. We're not trying to jinx anything, but how much fun would that be? Another Wildcat-on-Wildcat battle 6 years after K-State beat Kentucky in the Sweet 16. Okay, let's get started. Kellis, I may be wrong. Correct me if I am wrong, but I believe this is the first time you and I have had a conversation at the Courtyard by Marriott in Burlington, North Carolina.
I think I would remember it if we did it previously. And what a thrill it is that we are coming to you live on such a great location.
It is. We're actually outdoors, so you might hear some highway noise. You might hear some birds chirping, kind of like the Masters. You know, we get a little Masters ambiance here. And but yeah, we're hard off I-40, about 20 miles from Greensboro, where Kansas State is going to take on Montana State later tonight. This is a same-day podcast, right? But I figured we could get away with recording it on Friday morning with the Wildcats tipping off scheduled at 9:40 p.m. Eastern Time, 8:40 back in Central Time. So I'm not sure. Well, I am. I know I've covered a game that tips off as late as this one does. The problem is if the game before it goes long, Kentucky-Providence, the winner of Kentucky-Providence plays Kansas State, Montana State winner. This one could get pushed back till 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. or so, and that's just no good for anyone.
I don't know how people who live on the East Coast do this, even staying up all night for a 9 o'clock tip, which they get whenever like West Virginia is playing on Big Monday or something. The locals in Morgantown have to wait until 9 o'clock to watch them play. It's rough. You got to have a nap in there or something, a lot of caffeine. I don't know. I've been trying to set my body clock, like they say, coming in from the West Coast to deal with this. But, yeah, it's something new. I guess the only perk about this is that Kansas State has a little bit of training here because they played in the nightcap of the quarterfinals of the Big 12 tournament. And Montana State's coming in from the mountain time zone, so they're even at a more bizarre time setting.
For sure. Now, there was nobody on the team or on the coaching staff who was here the last time Kansas State opened the NCAA tournament in North Carolina. But it was good news for the Wildcats back in 2018, was it not?
That was a great experience for Kansas State. They beat Creighton in just
8-9 game.
Yeah, 8-9 games, smacked them pretty good, even without Dean Wade. That was the first time anybody really had heard of Mike McGurl. Little did we know we'd be watching him for like the next 5 years.
That's right, all the way up until last season.
Then the shocker of all shockers, UMBC upsets Virginia. Still the craziest locker room I've ever been to after any game. That place was lit. Those players were over the moon about what they'd just done. And then Kansas State takes advantage, gets to the Sweet 16. That's probably the happiest I'd seen Bruce Weber throughout his entire time there was after they got to the Sweet 16. So, maybe there's some good vibes there. Different city, but same state. Kansas State. A little more is expected of Kansas State this time. They're the 3 seed instead of the 9. 8-point favorites tonight against Montana State. And I think they're about a 45% chance to get out of this pod and move on to the Sweet 16 according to most analytical sites. And I imagine that is much, much higher than they were coming in the last time they were out here.
And it would be higher than any other team in the pod, which includes Kentucky and Providence. Is that a 6-11, I think? 6-11 game that they're playing that's feeding into the K-State Montana State winner. The other thing I remember about that path back in 2018 is Kentucky was in the Wildcats, the K-State Wildcats, way in that regional. But it was a Sweet 16 game then.
I know. Kansas State and Kentucky have just been on these wild, weird convergences of Wildcat supremacy in the NCAA tournament lately. If it happens, I don't want to write off Providence here, but if it happens and we get Kansas State, Kentucky in the next round, it'll be the third time in the last decade that we've seen K-State and Kentucky play in the NCAA tournament. It happened in St. Louis that year when Kentucky caught fire and made it to the national final, right? Yeah. Beat Wichita State the next round, so they were just wiping out all the Kansas teams that season. Then K-State got some revenge the last time they made it to the Sweet 16. That was in Atlanta.
Atlanta, right?
Or Catlanta, as they like to say at the time.
Right.
Kansas State beat Kentucky in an absolute thriller with Barry Brown making some really key shots down the stretch. And now I guess we get the rubber match between John Calipari and Bruce. Rubber won't be around for this one. It'll be the first time we see Calipari versus Jerome Tang. Again, if it happens. But you know what? There are much worse matchups to see repeatedly in the NCAA tournament. I can dig it.
No, it actually would be a lot of fun, and it would be one of the, I think, more highly anticipated games of the second round. Everybody in the country, Kentucky has this incredible fan base. Everybody's curious about those Wildcats. And Jerome Tang and these Wildcats have become such a good story this year. The question is, I think we agree that they can get past the Montana State Bobcats, the 14 seed in the first round, and it's a matter of would they be able to stand up to Kentucky, even though it's Kentucky's got the lower seed or the worst seed in that matchup. Well, let's talk about tonight's game. What is it about? Where can Montana State hurt K-State?
Well, a few ways. If you're looking at this from just a purely on-paper matchup standpoint, I think there are actually some reasons you would like the Bobcats here. They're pretty good at turning you over. They rank top 75 in the nation at doing that, and that's something that Kansas State has struggled mightily with lately. In their last two losses against West Virginia and TCU, they turn it over 20 times apiece, lose both games by pretty much 10 points, not really close. And that's been Kansas State's problem all season. When they turn the ball over 19-plus times, they're 1-5. When they limit their turnovers, their record is much, much better. Montana State is a team that can turn you over. So right there, that's something you got to be a little bit concerned about. They also get to the free throw rate at a very, very high rate, top 5 nationally. They love to go run their offense through the post. They love to create fouls. And once they get to the free throw line, they make their shots. They're shooting almost 80% from the line. So if you're playing Montana State, what does that tell you? You can't turn the ball over, and you can't get them to get to the free throw line all day long. The other things I would say is they do have Raekwon Battle, who's a transfer from Washington, who averages almost 18 points a game. So a really good player. And they also have some tall, agile defenders who could potentially give Kansas State some problems on the wing. When we have seen Markquis Nowell struggle going at the rim, it's because he's playing against teams like Kansas that put like Grady Dick or Kevin McCullough on him, and that size advantage comes into play. So right there, that shows you that there are a few ways you could see Montana State keeping this close or even potentially pulling off an upset. And I think some people have caught wind of that. The line on this game opened at about 10. I looked today, it's down to 7.5. So there are people who are backing Montana State here. For me personally, I'm going the other way. I think Kansas State wins. I think they cover just because they've got such an athlete advantage here.
They do. There's no doubt. Big Sky has not had much success in the NCAA tournament recently. I think they've lost 7. Their teams have lost 17 straight in the NCAA.
The last time I think they won, Montana beat Utah in about 2005-ish, something like that. So that would line up.
Yeah, line up with the time.
Going back before that, Weber State had a really crazy upsetting against North Carolina.
That was a 3-14, by the way.
Right, but we're talking, every 20 years this happens.
Yeah.
The Big Sky puts a team up there. And Montana State, hey, no disrespect to them. I used to work in Big Sky country.
Yes, you did.
I admire the league. Great place, Bozeman. I would love it if Kansas State would schedule a game there. That's a great trip. But when you just look at what they've done against power, every time they've tested themselves against power teams lately, it's just gone horribly wrong. They played Texas Tech in this tournament last year, lost by 35. Played Oregon this year, lost by 30. Played Arizona this year, lost by 22. They just haven't even been close. So to just magically close that gap, from 20-30 to right there in the game, I don't see it happening. I've been wrong before. I didn't see Princeton beating Arizona yesterday.
Or Furman beating Virginia.
I mean, I actually did have Furman beating
Wow.
Virginia, so back off, Blair.
Well done.
That can happen. But Princeton, I did not see that. Not in a million years did I see Princeton beating Arizona. But still, that's just kind of the way I'm seeing things here. I think Kansas State has their way.
One thing Montana State doesn't do well is shoot the three, and sometimes you want to say that for an upset in the NCAA tournament to happen, the underdog has to do something extremely well that's unexpected and sort of outside of their identity. To me, that would be going 10 for 17 on 3-pointers, but I'm not sure Montana State is capable of doing that.
Well, if Montana State hits 10 threes, then K-State is in trouble. Okay, but you're right. I mean, but that's what happened against TCU last game, right? They're the worst shooting team in the conference.
Yep.
They make 11 threes. I mean, what are you going to do? You're not going to beat TCU when they make 11 threes. Kind of the same story with Montana State, but you're exactly right. They don't like to shoot threes. They don't do it well. It's a strength for Kansas State. I'm sure their coaching staff has seen this. They're probably, when they saw that, were probably thinking, oh, good, They defend the three. We don't shoot the three. That's fine. They can defend the three-point line all they want. We'll just try to score twos. So I don't see them trying to bomb away here, but if they do make, if they get in desperation mode, it makes some fluky threes, then that would be a recipe for an upset, definitely.
For sure. One of the things I really like about covering the NCAA tournament is the access that we get to coaches and players. There's a lot of it, and it's often more than you get during the regular season with some programs. So, and the other thing is reporters from the schools that cover the other teams here get to talk to. So maybe there's a different sense of the questioning, or you get different answers. It just it just opens it up a little bit, and I really enjoyed spending time in the Kansas State locker room yesterday and hearing Jerome Tang on stage at the press conference. So I'm wondering, for a guy who's covered Kansas State all season long, every single game, every media opportunity, did you hear or learn anything yesterday that surprised you, or that maybe you didn't know?
I mean, nothing like earth-shattering. I will say one thing I did do was with the open locker room yesterday, we were able to go around and talk to some players who haven't necessarily contributed at the highest of levels this season, but are still, valuable pieces to the team and whatnot. And two guys I wanted to talk to were actually guys who were redshirting this year. Jerome Colbert, an LSU transfer, who the one time we saw him play this year was in an exhibition game against Washburn, where he had like 5 blocks in 5 minutes, and people were heartbroken the next week when we found out he was redshirting. It was like, what? You're redshirting this guy? I talked to him, and I talked to Taj Manning, another freshman redshirt forward who's been helping with the scout team all season. And it was interesting to hear what those guys had to say. Jerome Colbert told me he thought he's improved so much that he thinks he could make a run at Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year next season.
Oh, I love
next
hearing
season.
that.
So there's some confidence right there.
I love that.
And he said, he didn't intend to redshirt this season, but he just, once he started playing with these guys, he realized he wasn't ready for the Big 12 just then. He thinks he is now with the year of development. So I'm excited to see what he can do next year. And then Taj Manning as well. Jerome Tang has talked him up at every single opportunity this season. Kind of the same deal. Not his dream to redshirt, but it's helped him a lot. And he said he's learned a great deal going up against the starters he does every day. And if you're looking ahead, to next season, no matter what happens here, I think that Jerome Tang redshirting those guys is going to make Kansas State's front court next year much more versatile and much just heftier than what we've seen this season.
Baylor did a lot of that.
A lot of
Scott
that,
Drew.
yes.
Yeah, that was that's a Baylor Scott Drew thing, persuading players who know they can play and who could play to take a redshirt year, and it has worked out wonderfully for Baylor over the last decade or so, and that's and Kansas State appears to be starting down that path as well. So, okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, I want to ask Kellis about how Kansas State's recruiting prowess expanded this past year with the help of a couple of players. Hey, this is Blair. There are several ways to access the Star Sports section. Let me tell you about a couple of them. There's Sports Pass. For $12.99 a month, you get unlimited digital access to all of the Star Sports content, including beat writing, columns, features, pretty much everything we write. The deal renews monthly until you tell us to cancel. For $159.99 a year, you get everything the Star has to offer digitally, including sports and the e-edition. Go to kansascity.com and drop down to the bottom of the page where it says Start a Subscription for more information. Your support has never been more important. As always, thanks for reading and listening. All right, we are back on SportsBeat KC talking Kansas State and the NCAA Tournament with Kellis Robinett from the courtyard area of the Courtyard Hotel. I guess that's why they call it the Courtyard, because they have courtyards here. And again, you probably hear the traffic and the birds. We are between them, actually. Birds to one side and Interstate 40 to the other.
I'll tell you what we should have done if you wanted to be really quiet, is there's an empty pool right next to us. We could have gone down into that sucker and recorded a podcast from an empty swimming pool.
Now that I know would have been a first. So one of the national stories that's being written this week, you wrote it yesterday, is how this Kansas State roster came together almost in an impossible fashion. Jerome Tang gets here and everybody's, they had players leave, players transferred, just the roster was down to the studs, right? Mm-hmm. And I know just a few weeks after taking the job, I was wondering how in the world is Kansas State going to get a full roster? And without even knowing what was going to happen, I'm thinking, well, when you're starting to pick the Big 12 order of finish, you start at the bottom with K-State and then work your way up. So here they are, picked 10th in the Big 12. They finished third in the regular season, third seed in the Big 12 tournament, third seed in the NCAA tournament, and a lot of the credit, obviously the coaching staff did an incredible job, and Jerome Tang was Big 12 Coach of the Year, but the two returning players had a big role in helping shape this roster.
They really did. At the very start of Jerome Tang's tenure, like you said, not many players chose to stay, or perhaps more accurately, were invited to stay. It was just Ismeal, Massoud, and Markquis Nowell, so they went from 13 scholarship guys down to 2. In a perfect world, I think they probably would have liked to stay at perhaps 4 or 5. They obviously would have loved to have kept Nigel Pack. I think Selton Miguel, if he wanted to stay, I think they could have found room for him. He was a good player. And maybe Davion Bradford, even though in hindsight, his lumbering body probably doesn't fit this style. He's a 7-footer, though. If he said, I really want to play, I think they would have found room for him. But otherwise, I think they were fine with everybody else leaving. So, anyways, they come back with just 2. Not an ideal situation. I remember when you and I were at the Kansas City Catbackers event last, was it May or June?
June, I think. Early June, I think.
June. They said so few people on the roster that when Jerome Tang got up and talked in front of everybody, his promise was that they would have at least 8 scholarship players. At least. So, yes, exactly. At the time, not the greatest endorsement of their, the state of the roster at the time. But they pulled it together, and one of the main reasons for that was that they were able to bring in all these guys out of nowhere, was that people like Markquis Nowell, mostly I would say Markquis Nowell, but also Massoud, were so willing to help recruit. They basically for a month or two put their own, games to the side and were basically extra assistant coaches, worked the phones themselves, hosted guys, got on social media, found players that they thought could help. Hey, why don't you consider Kansas State? And really, they were extra recruiters for the Wildcats. They went on all the recruiting meals. Markquis Nowell told me he took his go-to spot for his go-to eating spot in town for recruiting players was Varsity Donuts. That seemed to work really well.
Works for me.
Yeah. I mean, hey, big donut team, big donut town. But yeah, he said it actually got really fun. He said Markquis told me that he got the same kind of thrill of hitting a game-winning shot that he did when a player would say, hey, I want to come and commit to you, which is rare for a player. You normally only get that from the coaches. But I think that shows the kind of buy-in and the team camaraderie that you have seen here, because everybody helped build it together. And I think without that, it would have been hard for this group to win as many games as they did.
I think it's a great story. It really is. And it's the first time it makes sense that that it would happen that way. I just hadn't heard it at another school. I hadn't heard that story with another school. I loved hearing it, and got I know Nowell talked about it on the at the podium yesterday, and we got to talk to Massoud about it in the locker room, and they had big smiles on their faces. They were talking about this. So I recommend everybody reading Kellis' story about it. It turned out really well. So good on the Wildcats, and I'm assuming going forward, the players will, as they do at every school, will have some influence on the recruiting, but not to the extent it happened in Jerome Tang's first year at Kansas State.
Yeah, I think next year we'll see guys hosting players, excited to welcome players to campus, but it won't be I don't think we're going to see, say, Naquan Tomlin next season at the end of every practice day spending 3 hours looking for new players. And fortunately, they've recruited a lot already. They've got some 4-star recruits coming in. And I'm sure they're going to have to hit the transfer portal to some extent here, but the word is out on Kansas State. It's not like last season where there are all these questions, there hasn't been success. The coaching staff is in place. They're coming off a great season. It should be a much easier sell this time around.
No doubt. Okay, so I don't know if you filled out a bracket. I did not. I usually don't. I'll identify some upset picks, and for the paper, the day that the bracket is selected, I do a Final Four, regional champions, and what the regional final matchup is. And
how do you not fill out a bracket?
I used to. But I'll tell you what. I used to do it for the Star. But then I started to feel kind of guilty when I had some bad years and people were getting in touch with me at the Star about, I followed your bracket and I was out after the first day, and I was starting to feel guilty about that. I didn't want to cost people money on the bracket. I think it's impossibly hard to do to be successful. Someone has to win, right? Any kind of bracket pool, but it's so difficult that. I saw this on ESPN SportsCenter this morning, that they had more than 20 million people submit brackets to their bracket challenge or whatever they call it. And after the first day, after Thursday, 658 were alive. So 658 out of more than 20 million. And you really just had the two major upsets, right? Furman and Princeton. But that is just how nuts the tournament is. It's kind of why we love it, that anything can happen. The way Furman won with the steal and the three-pointer in the last couple of seconds, and then Princeton coming back. Arizona didn't have a point in the final 5 minutes of their game. It's wonderful drama. There's nothing else like it in sports. I think the first 2 days of the NCAA tournament are two of the best days in sports during all year. So, and
then also we had Texas A&M Corpus Christi hit a meaningless three at the buzzer to cover the spread against Alabama, and San Diego State hit a worthless layup to cover against Charleston yesterday. Two great moments for gamblers as well.
You were paying more attention to the end of the Corpus Christi Alabama game than any other game yesterday, because you knew what was at stake.
I didn't even have money on that one, but that just, those late game situations crack me up so much when it's a walk-on versus walk-on and neither one really cares.
Well, what was funny?
And it's deciding the fate of a ticket
of millions of dollars. Millions of dollars.
Well, it's funny if you watch in the arena. Alabama wins that game by 21. If you go back and listen to the crowd when that shot goes in, it's just a chorus of boos. You know what this. I mean, the people knew what was up.
Especially, and you were onto this. The Corpus Christi player looked like he was just kind of dribbling out the clock, and 5 seconds, 4 seconds. All right, he's going to dribble out the clock. Alabama's going to cover, and at the last second, he turns it loose and makes the three to not bust a bracket, but bust somebody's bet for sure. So, anyway, that is the exquisite drama that is the NCAA Tournament. All right, Kellis, we got to get over to Greensboro. Great catching up, and we'll do it again soon. That'll do it for today and this week on SportsBeat KC. Thanks to our production staff of Randy Mason, Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. Tip of the cap to Kellis Robinett for sharing his insights. Best place to follow coverage of the NCAA Tournament or anything else in sports is the Morning Sports Edition. Took me a while to get through the 52 pages today, crammed full of news about March Madness, the NFL free agency, the World Baseball Classic, and everything else in sports. Check it out at liveedition.kansascity.com. Live Edition, that's one word, .kansascity.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with more editions of SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.